Testing. We now have John Teddle acting in place of Arthur Scargill. Okay, thank you. Thanks very much. Okay. First of all, I'd like to just say on behalf of Arthur, he did ask me to apologise, and there's no one more disappointed that it can't be here today than himself. I'd just like to say, though, I don't think he really wants it to be put about that he's on his last legs or anything like that. It's a question, if you're a miner or something, then backs were at a premium in that way, and I think it's something that's caught up with him now, but he'll be back. He was here on the 9th of February at the anniversary of Saltley Gate, and vigorous then, and I've no doubt he'll be back pretty soon to speak again in Birmingham. And he's spoken in Birmingham quite a number of times, because it's in Birmingham in '72, when he came here, that he got so much support from the people of Birmingham. And he's told this, if you've heard, on a number of occasions, because in I think it was 2012, the Trades Council had celebrated the 40th anniversary at Saltley Gate, and it was bloody freezing. It was really cold, and there was Arthur there, was speaking. Ken Capstick and various other people were there who and you can still see these. They're now on YouTube, and they're quite inspiring actually to see now. So that's there from that particular time. But I didn't know the story. I was teaching in 1972, and I didn't really know what was going on next door, in this kind of way. But what I've now found out about that, we've had anniversary meetings every year since, up to this year, and we've learnt a bit more every time. So it's been good. Those people who've taken part in it, we've learnt more and more about what's going on, what's happened at that time. Now, as I said, the thing about '72, I'm told I'm a dinosaur. It's 2019 now, it's different now. So, we've got to change that. So solidarity is not the thing now, is it? It's gone. Well, if you're a follower of the neoliberal model, yes, it has. Because it's not about human values anymore. It's about other matters. So, I don't apologise, and we don't apologise for looking back at '72, in Birmingham, and as Arthur himself says, it was the people of Birmingham who came out and looked after how many miners who came down. Thousands of miners came and had nowhere to stay and so on. What happened? The people of Birmingham took them in. And he's eternally grateful to the people who came in. All right, he wasn't, what I've learned, the thing I have learned about that, I thought it was all done and dusted and prepared. And, Arthur was saying that one day he was told that he'd be bringing coachloads of miners down to Birmingham. Where's Birmingham? He'd never been here before, and turns up and ends up in a car park and looks around, and there are coaches there, and he's looking for the lads. The coaches, as he said at the meeting, they weren't there for the miners. They were full of police officers from across the country, and so. This was something that he found out at the time. But then we had the day itself, when I think it was 30,000 people stopped work, 15,000 marched on Saltley Gate. And, well, thank goodness Arthur was there, because, there have been a lot of people involved in this, including people we know very well. Frank Waters. He was one of the people that Arthur mentions, and somebody who was a good friend of mine at the time, Maura Simmons, who was then, she was secretary of the Labour Party in Birmingham, and was very active in what's going on there. He speaks about those people, and again, we can find out a lot more people who were involved in that time. Subsequent years, we found out more and more. I think. One year we found that there was a Barbadian, I'm trying to think of his name at the moment, a Barbadian who, George Gordon, who is on radio, New Style Radio broadcaster, he was pointing out that the different groups were there. So we realised that in 1972, it was everybody got together. It wasn't just one group, it wasn't just a group of men, it was a group of women and men, it was African, Caribbean, Asian, and so on. But it didn't just happen that way because, you know, a lot of people were quite blasé about it. So it took the people from each group to actually get other groups within that meeting. So it's a lesson that we can learn today about solidarity. And I want to come back to that in a minute, because I think during the meetings we had people come to us from the Cuban embassy and from the Venezuelan consulate. And they stood in solidarity with what they saw as a great event in Birmingham in 1972. And I think at the moment, when I see the press, you know, we can't even find out what's going on in Venezuela. And if we read what's said, it seems to be Maduro who's the criminal. And yet, you know, what we're seeing is, again, the situation. Didn't we learn nothing from Chile? What was it, 62? I don't know. See, looking back at that time.
73.
Thank you, yeah. It was looking back at that time and what came out of that. There's an article in the Morning Star today, we don't want another Pinochet. So, you know, there are so many things that we want to think in this respect. But one of the things that is on the agenda at the moment is, I don't know whether you've seen this, but at Digbeth campus of Southend City College, there's this mural on the wall, which shows Saltley Gate on the day. It was a brilliant mural, and it was commissioned by Birmingham Trades Council, I think, and it's there. But part of it isn't actually. It's not all there on the picture, but it shows just as was described. People coming down. You can see the marchers coming from all directions. And Arthur himself describes the day when this happens. He said it was very quiet in the morning and nothing was happening. And then suddenly he realised the buses had all stopped. There was nothing happening. And then suddenly, from each direction, there were people marching over the hill. And that was the start of the day. And you can see, it shows Arthur himself standing on the urinal in Saltley, telling the people, I think, what was just said. You know, he said, this was for the future. And that was a speech he made at the time. So I think this is something that is well worth remembering. So I say, since 2012, we've had anniversary, some celebration every year, and Arthur's been to speak at several of them. I think it was the 45th, 1917, he came to the council house and he spoke about Saltley Gate. He spoke also about Orgreave. And it's got a banner on it, Turn Orgreave into Saltley. Now, I mean, from Arthur's point of view, if certain things hadn't happened at Orgreave, and remember he was there, he got involved in the battles himself, and he said, you know, he wished he saw more leaders these days leading from the front and taking that, and that's just what he did. Now, this is, I saw this on video, and I made a transcript of it. There's a few copies of it on the table in there. But that video was made by Ken Capstick and his son. And so one of the things that we've been, as a Socialist Labour Party, you know, how do we get our message across? Big parties, the media, they don't want to know. So what we've turned to is YouTube. So the talk, it was in the council house, rooms 3 and 4, and Arthur spoke. And he spoke, well, he got at me because he said, you've asked me to speak about 4 or 5 things. I've never had to sort of do that. When he covered Saltley, he went on to Orgreave. And somebody said afterwards, this is a historic evening. And it is, it's a historic document because it's an eyewitness account of a part of history. It's a part of the history of Birmingham that we all ought to know about and be proud about, and shows the kind of solidarity that I'd like to see now as showing to comrades, as the people from the consuls from Venezuela, and now I mention Cuba because I gather now that they're being asked they're being taken to court for the property that was taken in the revolution. I think so. The United States are turning their attention to Cuba as well. But where's the solidarity we're getting? We're certainly not expecting it from the government. But I'm horrified to see that the shadow Secretary for Foreign Affairs has a shot at Maduro. All right, I mean, you know, nobody's beyond criticism. But for goodness sake, in terms of things at the moment, you know, looking at the people who are setting up a puppet in the state, looking to see what the West have done, along with NATO, the EU, the rest of it, what can we expect? And what I'm looking for, comrades, it's why it's good to be together on May Day, and we get the chance to talk about and hear about things and put things together. So, you know, what I'd like, I mean, maybe a message from this group in solidarity for these countries that are having to put up with this, but we're not getting any information about the true state of things. We don't know. We're getting the question about the numbers of people and so on. It's not put about. But what somebody was telling me, we hear about the Western press and so on, about. They're not telling us. They're telling us that the puppet's taken over and how many countries have agreed with that. Well, if they're African countries and Asian countries, many of them are with Venezuela and have expressed it, but do we read about it? No, we don't. A few years ago, I read The Guardian. It had a whole lot of articles about neoliberalism. And one of them, I remember the title was, "It Brings Out the Worst in Us." Now, do you ever see that in The Guardian now? It seems they've had a new editor, I understand, but the Independent, so-called, none of the press, are we getting any of this information? So we're not being fed, we're not being given, we're fed a lot of crap instead. Comrades, I'm sorry that Arthur hasn't been able to get here. I just want to mention one thing, though. This is an article this morning in the Morning Star. I'm glad to see it's Ken Livingstone. No more Pinochets in Latin America. I'll just find it though, just to give a whiff of that Arthur's still with it. The Socialist Labour Party has repeatedly made it clear it will not stand any candidates in the European elections or support any party, organisation or individual standing in these elections. Participation in these elections is in breach of the democratic vote of the British people in 2016. And finally, we'll never have a fair democratic electoral system in the United Kingdom until we introduce a system based on proportional representation, a principle which was a cornerstone of the Labour Representation Committee in 1900. The French government has just conceded it will introduce democratic proportional representation for all elections, and the UK must be pressured to do the same.